Welcome, David Scott, to the show. You've got 2,600 viewers waiting with bated breath on what you're going to say.
Well, firstly, I've been switching tonight between listening to you and listening to ITV. All right. And I have to say, you are miles better. They are the degree to which it's been the bland leading the bland. Now, I turned it on because I wanted to see Nippy's wee face.
Yeah, of course you did.
And that was worth it for a wee while at least. And she didn't say very much. I mean, she really didn't say very much. And then she finally started talking. She said she'd been noticing that she was out on the stump. She said she wasn't doing as much campaigning as she normally does. That tells a story. We might discuss why. But she was out and she was noticing a lack of enthusiasm. And I thought she was going to say for the Labour Party. No. For her. She actually said that live on ITV, which was the highlight of their show. But apart from that, it was very bland. They're not talking about any of the real issues.
Of course they're not.
They're not. They're missing everything. Right? So you had John Watt on and you were talking about COVID-19 and the state and government and political establishment response to it, which was massive. It's the entire reason we have a cost of living crisis, for example, right? They've devalued the value of money, so we've all got poorer because they said, hey, don't leave your homes for 2 years, sit in your backsides, we'll just print money. She'll be fine. Don't you worry your pretty head about it. Trust us. Oh, and by the way, mask up and be afraid. You said there has to be a political accounting for this. ITV didn't say that.
No. The thing is, David, this is why you've been brought on, right? Because you're going to give us an unvarnished truth here. And this is the thing. There needs to be a political reckoning for what happened to us. Our money has been devalued. It's not the cost of living crisis we're going through. It's the cost of lockdown crisis we're going through. Everyone needs to be aware of this. And if they're not, please spread the word. It is not the cost of living crisis, guys. It is a direct result of what's happened during COVID with the insane money printing. It's just purely insane. If you would just humor me a bit, I've got we'll go for another 50 minutes, but you can stay on. We're going to run a bit longer with you, David, because I've got people coming into me with accounts with information, so I want to phone them live on the show and find out what's happening at the accounts. Okay. So what I'll do is we've got Alan McManus, who's at the Paisley County now. I'm going to phone him right up now, live on the show, guys. We'll get him on speaker. So hopefully you can hear this, guys. So I've got the mic at the...
This is the Vodafone voicemail service.
The Vodafone. I'm not... right, okay. Right, we'll go to the next one then. We'll go with Ewan. Ewan is in the Elgin County. So Ewan is a candidate for the Scottish Family Party. Hello, Ewan.
Hello.
Hello, you are live on the Niall Fraser show to 2,600 viewers. And we're all wondering what the situation is. If you want to tell people where you are, who you represent, and sort of give us a first-hand view of what you're viewing or what you're seeing.
So I'm Ewan Morris. I'm the Scottish Family Party candidate up here in Moray West, Nairn and Strathspey. This used to be Douglas Ross's seat, and last time round he won it by a very tight margin. Notionally the SNP won it by boundary changes, but I have to tell you it is a really interesting atmosphere up here because I can't reveal too much, obviously. But I say it's very interesting. It's not going to be a good night for the SNP, I don't think.
Well, that is music to my ears, Ewan. I mean, you can reveal as much as we would like to reveal. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the lay of the land? Where do you think the chips are going to fall?
I think polling for this area has been solidly SNP by 10%. I don't see that happening. just by seeing the sheer, there's a real backlash against the SNP right now, and they are not even taking, I don't even think, a third.
Wow. Wow.
I'm seeing a lot of crying, a lot of greeting, a lot of tears.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God. These 2,600 viewers are absolutely going to be in fits of laughter here. The SNP mob are crying, Ewan.
Oh, I've seen a few tears. I think it's going to be a bad result. I think Reform are going to have an incredible result just from seeing it's this last week has really turned around in Scotland for them.
Wow. Right, okay. What you can do, Ewan, when you get a firmer picture of the lay of the land, give me a call back and I'll get you live on the show as soon as you call back, okay? With a sort of when you've got a firmer picture of where the chips are going to fall, okay?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
right,
that's good. We'll see you then.
Right, thanks very much, Ewan. You're a star. Thank you.
Cheers.
So that was you.
This brings us to a really interesting point, Niall. Right? They've got the exit poll, and they're very confident in their exit poll, and we've all been there before, and we've seen them be wrong before. But there's two things that make it very difficult this time to get the exit poll right. Firstly, Reform's coming from a really low base, and it's putting on huge numbers of votes. Right? It's very difficult to predict that from polling. I think that they're predicting, I think currently it's estimated 13. They're still predicting 13 seats for Reform. That could be plus or minus 100%. Right?
Yeah.
It could easily be double. And the other one is the SNP, because the SNP there's a lot of tactical voting against the SNP, because the SNP, because of the policies in Scotland, which we'll get into what those have been, if you like, but because of policies in Scotland, the authoritarianism, the corruption, the whole stink of it, the view in Scotland is that this is a tired party with no ideas that need to go.
Yeah, of course.
And there's tactical voting to punish them. So that's a very unique thing for a party that in a UK term is in the UK sense is not in power. They're being punished in Scotland as the party of power. So they're actually having the same thing done to them that is happening to the Conservatives all across the country. So that makes it very difficult to predict in Scotland, and Scotland's already very difficult to predict because it was a 4-way split. Now it's 5. This makes, on a first past the post system, this makes predictions really, really difficult. So the prediction that the SNP will get 10 seats, we'll see, that could be plus or minus 100% as well. Right? I think there's a lot to see here tonight before the night's out. I think it's, despite the fact that we know who's going to win, it's a really interesting election.
I mean, why do you think? I mean, I've discussed this with many of the guests before, but there seems to be so many factors. Here we go. Actually, we've got a call from one of the counts, David. Okay.
By the way.
Alan, hello. You are live on the Niall Fraser show with over 2,600 viewers. So if you would just want to tell people who you are and where you are and what you're seeing on the ground.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Alan McManus. I'm the chairman of Freedom Alliance, and I'm here as the election agent for Mark Turnbull, who's our candidate for Paisley and Renfrewshire South. So I'm in Paisley Lagoon Centre, where the count is taking place for 2 constituencies, Paisley and Renfrewshire South and Paisley and Renfrewshire North. Paisley and Renfrewshire North, they have completed the first stage, and the figures are, I believe, 70,907 electorate, 41,963 turnout, which is 58.8% turnout. They may not be exact figures, but the turnout percentage is exact. It looks to me, just from going around, I've sent Niall some photographs, just looking at the baskets and the piles of ballot papers, it looks in Paisley and Renfrewshire North as if it's a contest between Gavin Newlands of SNP and Alison Taylor of Labour, whereas in Paisley and Renfrewshire South, it looks like it's going to Johanna Baxter of Labour. So that's my initial impression.
So you reckon Paisley and Wren South is going to go Labour, but it's still a hot contest in North? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think South is going Labour, and I think North it's between SNP and Labour. That's my. Although I'm not looking at postal votes here, so I don't have any idea of those. So that might swing things considerably.
Okay, Alan. When you get a firmer view, please do feel free to call us back, and I'll get you live on the show immediately as you phone back, and you have a sort of a more firmer picture of how the other one's shaping up. The first of all, just to recap, Paisley South looks to be going Labour.
Yes.
That's fantastic news. Right, Alan, you've been an absolute star. Please feel free to phone back at any time you get some more information, okay? And you'll be live on the show.
Brilliant. Thank you,
You're
Niall.
a star.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's Alan McManus, ladies and gentlemen, live from the Paisley Count. David, we will run on a bit longer with your segment. You feel free to stay on an extra 10-15 minutes because I'm cutting it your time here, my friend.
No,
it's all good news,
problem.
David, isn't it?
Yeah, no. I've got I'll be up late tonight. So if you want me back on, if you want to take a break at some point,
Likewise.
I'll be here. I thought that John Watt's segment, which I caught quite a lot of, was excellent. Now, I was at his event in Glasgow. It was very glitzy. There was a high production values, a lot of excitement. It wasn't dull, and it was thoughtful, and there's a lot of interesting people there. But it also showed some of the limitations of what we're dealing with. So we had one politician, Neil Hanvey there, and credit to Neil Hanvey for standing up for vaccine injured, because there are few that are doing that.
Absolutely.
And good on him for it. But there's a but here. When it came time to Q&A, I wanted to ask a political question, and I asked him. I basically made the case for we should withdraw nationally from the World Health Organization because of the nature of basically the lies it's telling. They've redefined the definition of health. It's a political organization pushing political goals and a political tyranny, a medical tyranny, right? And we saw that during COVID. Now, what he said was, well, you can say that if you like, but if I say that, if anyone says that in the political world, they'll be called a conspiracy theorist, and they'll get nowhere, and there's no point.
But I mean, fast forward to the last few days, and Farage is saying the exact same thing as you, David.
Yes. Now, so here's the thing. So he didn't see the political opportunity of telling the truth. Right? He assumed, and this is not a criticism of Neil Hanvey. I don't want to make it sound like I'm going after Neil Hanvey because I'm not. This is a broader point. It's like if you've seen someone who's been manipulated by a narcissist, for example, and I would put it to you that the political world is like a giant narcissist. They get so that they no longer have confidence in what the truth is. Right? The fear is that the narcissist lies, the fake narrative, the falseness will carry the day, will carry public opinion, will hold sway, and the truth will not be believed. If they get you believing that, we're lost. You have to stand up for the truth. Now, Mr. Hanvey and so many others, and Mr. Hanvey's done better than most, but so many others refuse to stand up for the truth. The good thing about Farage, I'm not a particular fan, but from time to time, he will stand up and he will say something that's true when it's difficult, when it's dangerous, when it's unpopular, and he'll say it anyway. He's doing at least something on immigration, and he's the only one talking about that. ITV never mentioned it. I watched a fair bit of the coverage. It never came. COVID-19 never came up. Immigration never came up. Right? I don't know what country they think they're living in, but that was what they were covering, or not covering. So he'll talk about that. He talked about Western policy in Ukraine and how it prompted the war, which is true.
Yes, absolutely.
And he was rounded on, he's conspiracy theorist, he's an apologist for Putin, all this nonsense. I don't think that harmed him at all. I think the people who are going to believe the nonsense are not going to vote for him anyway, and he's not losing anything. And that by speaking the truth, he makes it a binary choice. It's everybody else or it's reform, right? Because, hey, he's at least saying something that's true. So the political establishment have failed the country. They failed the country most noticeably during COVID-19, where there was a collective, almost universal failure of thought, of integrity, and of courage to actually stand up and say, you know what, lads, it's the flu. We're okay. Let's not panic. Nobody would say it. They were terrified.
Yeah.
And they led us into penury, and they led us into all these problems. Right? A complete failure across the political spectrum. And on immigration, the same thing.
Yeah.
And you look at what's now on offer. Now, we have a particular view in Scotland, and yes, I will cheer every time the SNP loses the seat. But we have to remember, we're not really solving the problem.
No.
Because we're just importing a different version of the same belief system. It was, I think I heard it on your program, and when maybe the time, it was UK A Force for Good when they were talking about the Labour Party saying that across a whole range of things, you can't put a cigarette paper between them and the SNP. This is true.
Yeah.
And this is our problem, because we are in a position where there is a political consensus, and it's a political consensus which is anti-life, which is anti-thriving, which is nihilistic, and it's dark. And that's what's holding sway. And the more it takes power, the more the more I think the people are rejecting it. They're certainly not inspired by it. Sometimes they're overwhelmed by it because everyone's repeating the same thing. But no one's actually given any genuine hope or energy by this message. So this is what we're going to see a lot of in the next 5 years in Britain. And from a Scottish perspective, I want to maybe, if we get a chance, to talk a wee bit about what Labour is, what the SNP is, and what's really missing from the political dialogue that we have in Scotland.
I mean, in general, David, yes, it's a fantastic thing we're getting rid of the SNP, at least by, say 80%. But you're right. And again, I go back to Craig Hewson's analogy, where we're being asked to choose between a shite and a jobby. And it's funny because it's such a Scottish thing to say.
He's got a way with words.
He does have a way with words, so he does. And I hope he's still watching. But this is the thing. We're putting it at the expense of getting rid of Labour. The SNP. We've now got Labour here. What does that mean for Scotland? Probably more of the same, David. And I like what you're saying about the truth here. The truth seems to be a rather rare commodity amongst politicians these days. But it's what wins. It's like Bobby Busher saying it. Truth will win always. It just takes a certain amount of time before the truth does win. So when does when are we going to see a political reckoning for COVID, David? Is it after we've seen off Labour as well?
They'll be desperate not to have a political reckoning for COVID, because the political reckoning for COVID goes all the way to the top.
Yes.
If there's a political reckoning for COVID, you wouldn't have a World Health Organization. Wouldn't be a case of us leaving it. It just closed the lights, put it out of its misery. You wouldn't have a United Nations, right, you wouldn't have any of the major parties because right, I'm in the private sector, right? In the private sector, you have a huge disaster, right? You're no longer in business. You like,
Yeah, of course.
thanks for playing, right? You've lost your capital. You don't get to be an entrepreneur anymore, right? Go and get an honest job and don't bother us. Fine. But in the political world and in the world of government, it doesn't work like that. Your failure tends to be rewarded. They all backed it. Now, so here's one problem with the Labour Party. The Labour Party are benefiting from the fact that Tories are massively unpopular, right? That's core.
Of course.
And they're benefiting from the fact that the Tories have again betrayed their natural supporters as they did over Brexit.
Yes.
And are in a position where Team Farage is stealing their votes.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's the basic core of what's happening, right? But the Tories are unpopular for what reasons, right? Number one, mass immigration. Number two, cost of living crisis. Cost of living crisis came from the COVID policy. Everything that happened during all of that, the Labour criticism of the Tories were, you're not
not
going
hard
far
enough.
You're not. Lock us down harder, baby. Right?
Yeah.
Let in more immigrants. You're not being altruistic enough. You're not being generous enough. We want everybody's welcome. Refugees welcome everybody. The whole world come to Britain. Yeah. Right? We are so good. We are so generous that we're to a fault. Oh, and by the way, if you're a footballer and you collapse and you haven't got a injection for COVID, then you really shouldn't get treated in the NHS. Right? So the combination of enormously generous and welcoming and altruistic and brutally harsh, right? That they managed to pull that one off. And in every case where the Tories were getting it wrong, they had the Labour Party and the SNP saying, no, you're not going far enough. We want it more wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, there has to be a working out of that. We saw it in Scotland, where I called it, it's like VAT. It was just like English policy, but 20% worse, right? And Nippy ultimately paid a price for that. Took a while, but she did pay a price for that. And the Labour Party, having supported every mistake the Conservatives made, pretty much, apart from the Liz Truss issue, are how does that work out in government? You now hand them the reins of power. How does that go well? Mm-hmm. I don't see a positive outcome. Are they going to do something about immigration? Mm-hmm. No,
they're not.
Are they going to do something about the cost of living crisis? No. What they're going to do is they're going to put taxes up. They're going to force people who would otherwise being invested in Britain away and abroad, and we're going to have a stagnating economy, right? They're not going to do anything about the extra 25% corporation tax. So anyone running their own business can't leave the money in the business. It's been sucked out by the government at an increasing rate. They're not going to do anything about that because they want the money. They're desperate for them to give us your money. And this is coming across because ultimately it's the politics of resentment. It's the politics of envy. It's the politics of coveting your neighbour's goods. It's the politics of if we just control enough, steal enough, lock you down hard enough, if you obey enough, things will be okay. And they won't be.
Let me take it another direction. We know the inadequacies with Labour. The only reason we're going to be ended up with Labour, especially here in Scotland, is just purely because people are so sick of the SNP. And they're right. I mean, I'm looking at all the papers I bought today, and it's change is the word of the day. And purely it's change. It feels like we're changing the curtains. That's all we're really changing. I mean, the inner workings of everything are still active. But let me take it in another direction as well. So I'm asked, and I feel like it's a very important question, David, is, I was just on the sort of cusp of writing a new speech. And it takes me quite a long time to write a speech because, I'm trying to encapsulate what's happening to us, and what for the life of me, I can see Britain in general and politics in general, just across the West, being polarised. we're being drawn to one side or the other. And the example I gave earlier on was the type of George Galloway figure on the left and the sort of Nigel Farage figure on the right. But I was going to title the speech "String Theory," right? The point being, who's pulling the strings behind Farage? Is there anyone pulling the strings by Farage? Because for me, just like yourself, I refuse to be puppeteered in such a fashion. In fact, I resist the strings. Maybe I should be calling it resist the strings instead of string theory. But in the same aspect, I feel that there is a sort of strings attached to Farage in the same way that strings are attached to Labour as strings are attached to the SNP. Likewise, everybody's alluding to the World Economic Forum, the UN, and all these, supranational, organisations. So my question is to you is it worth the gamble in taking on, a party like Reform, knowing that perhaps they do have strings attached? The first question is, do you think there's strings attached? And two, do you think it's worth the gamble?
I'm sure there's strings attached. They've all got strings attached. You stand some chance because it's at least relatively new, so it's not as well hidden. I went along some years ago now to a campaign meeting for a pro-independence group in Perth, right? And I went along to ask a few questions, have a laugh, and it was very interesting because they were getting ready for the second independence referendum, and at this point they were sure it was just around the corner because Nicola had told them it's just around the corner. And they were sure that, the Tories are really unpopular now, and the Labour Party are falling apart. This was back in the days of the far left running the Labour Party. So the Labour Party were tanking in the polls. So they were saying, well, the Labour Party falling apart. So their tactic was, we just rerun the 2014 referendum, but this time we'll win. Go by default. So it's in the bag. So I started asking a few questions in this. So we got to the Q&A. And I asked a couple of questions. I was told, you're not asking any more questions. Troublemaker. Right? But it was really interesting because at least half the room was on my side. And they were saying, yeah, that's a good question. We want to know the answer as well. One of the questions I asked was, look, you're telling us all about where to hand out leaflets and what tactics to use. But what about what independence is actually all about? Where's that being discussed? Where's it being decided? If we have a view, how do we get that view heard? And it was like magic. There was a top table of about 6 people, and they were completely silent. And they looked at one another. Right? And no one had a clue. They didn't know. They were getting diktats down from on high. This is policy, go and make it happen. Right? There was no discussion. It was clear the entire movement was top down. There was nothing allowed from the grassroots. That's the SNP, right? The SNP is dictatorial to its very core. It used to be like that. It is now. That's Alex Salmond. Alex Salmond was a Maoist. Yeah, you hire a Maoist, you get a Maoist. Okay? It shouldn't be a big surprise.
Didn't Nicola Sturgeon name her book, her speech book, Women Hold Up Half the Sky, which is literally a Mao quote.
Yeah.
It's sensational to see the same political sort of notions, the same political ideas. It's almost like it's cyclical, David.
Aye. Now, so just to finish the point, yes, there'll be strings with Reform. And if anyone's out there thinking, well, I would like to get involved, please get in touch with me if you do and let me know how it goes, because you will know quite quickly whether it's reasonably genuine or not, because there'll be a way where you can have your voice heard within the party. That's not the case in the SNP, and the SNP people know it. And it's not the case in any part of the indie movement. It's not, which is strange, but it's true. Right. So if you go in, if anyone fancies this, you'll know quite quickly, is it open or is it shut down and dictated from on high? And if it's dictated from on high, my advice to you would be leave.
Mhm.
Now, another thing you said, so just one other thing what's in my mind, with when you were on with John Watt, who was, it was a really interesting segment. He was talking about community
Exactly.
and the sort of community that Scotland used to be, and he was absolutely right. Now, I don't know if you read it, but I did an article on this a few weeks back.
We'll get links to your articles. If you don't know, David does some really incredible in-depth articles, and David's sort of like on like unvarnished truth level of articles here. So if I could encourage everyone to subscribe to his Substack, we'll get his links up. But if you want to continue, sorry, David.
Yeah, so this one was called, for me, a short article. This was called Wild Mountain Time. And I was listening to the Corries singing a song, Wild Mountain Time, from, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, something like that. And it was near the end of the night, and the audience spontaneously joined in. I thought, you could hear something in this. What I heard was the Scotland I remember. Everybody shared a common community, common sense of community. They knew the same songs. They were relaxed in one another's company. Nobody cared whether you were SNP or Conservative. It didn't matter. That was just politics. You were Scottish. You were part of the nation. You had this culture going back, here 1,200 years and more, but thousands of years. And you shared this with your people. You shared this with your neighbours, and you were a people, part of a larger people, and we were all okay with that as well, but a unique part of this larger people with a unique history and a unique contribution. And we knew the songs and we joined in, and it was natural, wasn't coerced, wasn't forced. And it's not the Scotland we have now. And I know when it changed in 2014.
Yeah.
Because one half thought, well, certainly more than one half of the country thought the SNP have won an election. They get to the part of the quid pro quo is we have a decision point on whether we're independent or not. They've earned that. We'll have a vote, and then we'll all abide by the vote. But the other lot weren't playing that game, right? They were doing Maoism.
Yes.
We're not abiding by don't vote. That's a tactic. Right? And when we lost, well, we'll just carry on and we'll demonize the people who voted the other way. And that's where it went wrong. That's where, and much as I don't admire Alex Salmond, I really don't, and he is a Maoist, and he's caused a lot of harm because he's a Maoist. He was more capable as a politician than Nicola Sturgeon.
Yes, he was.
He resigned when they lost the 2014 election with a certain degree of nobility about him.
Yeah.
A lot of people would have just tried to hang on. And we got Nippy. And Nippy is a poor imitation of Alex. She's narrow-minded, she's bitter, and that permeated the country. So it was 2014 and on. What did the harm to the country was the Sturgeon years.
Yes.
So I just wanted to lay that out there.
No, I mean, you're absolutely correct in your summation, and thanks so much for your detailed and quite frankly, like just unvarnished, truthful opinion on things. And you're right. And I mean, people have been commenting on, how much they loved you when you're on UK Column News. And UK Column News was at one point such a pivotal news outlet during the COVID years, David. You remember? It used to be the voice of reason, and in amongst a sort of news climate that was just so utterly devastatingly like false. We weren't getting our side of the story at all. There was never, a room for talking back, for speaking back, and never really room for or sort of disagreement. It was their way or the highway. And UK Column News, when you were on it at least, was a fantastic outlet for people to sort of find the truth in amongst, it was like find the truth in amongst the haystack of lies.
The needle of truth.
Just when I think back to the COVID years, it was it was like a breath of fresh air listening to yourself on UK Column, and hearing, just what you thought. I mean, it felt like you were hearing your inner monologue speak. It was that succinct. So David, thanks for everything that you do, not only for appearing on this, but just all the work that you continue doing, and your quest to bring the truth to the forefront here in Scotland. And I see you've got a really nice studio set up here, Northern Exposure. David is a broadcaster, writer. He's a writer extraordinaire, I must add. And I do encourage everyone here to subscribe to his Substack. So David, thank you. What you want any sign-offs before we go?
Yeah, look, as I say, I'm away to do some work and put the election coverage on the background, probably yours because it's far better than ITV. If I'll stick your team my phone number. If you want me back on later in the night, I'll still be here. So
Okay.
give me a buzz, and I'll if you want a quick 5 minutes on maybe, I don't know, Aberdeen South or something like that, which is apparently going very badly.
Yes.
For the SNP. And by the way, I've not yet completely abandoned my small residual hope that we reach net zero. Right? It's just possible.
Well, you hear that, ladies and gentlemen, nat zero is still very possible. So once we come back from the wee small break, thank you once of all. We'll bid farewell to David, and we'll take a small intermission. After that, we've got sorry, I've had too much champagne, guys. This is what it is. See, as soon as I seen that exit poll come out, I just knew I was going to be ended up drinking too much. We've got Nick Mitchell coming on of We Say It podcast, my relative, if you can believe that. So we'll bid farewell to David Scott. We'll take a small intermission because I just know that you want to hear that song again. So we bid farewell to David. Thank you very much for coming on, and we'll keep him in the sort of in the background just in case we need them later on, which I suspect we very well might. So I know you want to hear the song again, guys. Again, it's going to be a wee small toilet break for me. We've been going for 4 hours 20 minutes, guys. It's a marathon stream, but we keep going.